Hello and welcome to a slightly belated episode of Two Chicks, One Show. A few personal issues came up this week, so we've moved this week's episode from Wednesday to Friday, today, 3 p.m., right now. We are continuing our discussion of Outlander with an extremely dramatic episode this week as Geillis and Claire are on trial.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I'll take it away. So Geillis and Claire were arrested for witchcraft and now are awaiting judgment in the village. But things are not looking so well. But good old Ned shows up and tries to defend them, but still kind of is failing at it. So with Dougal and Jamie far away, the ladies are kind of stuck and very much believe that they will be burned alive until Geillis makes a move and saves Claire, and then Jamie comes in, of course, at the last minute and also saves Claire. And then more crap happens. It wasn't just the trial. There was so much more after the trial. And Claire kind of shares a little secret with Jamie that will change their lives forever.
Dun, dun, dun. I feel like every single time you do a recap, I do that. So one thing that struck me in this episode, which was like I think kind of interesting, was this could really easily have been a season finale.
Yeah, it was the best episode I think ever of this show.
It was definitely very, very good. I liked it a lot. And it, like I said, it could have been, if they'd wanted to make it like a 10-episode season, they could have cut out some of like the unnecessary stuff in like the past few episodes, because it feels like they're really stretching things out.
Yeah.
Which they don't need to because they have so much book left. But so like they could have cut out some of that superfluous stuff, streamlined the story a little bit, and this could have easily been the finale, but obviously they're trying to do one book per season.
Yeah.
So they're not doing that. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with the rest of the season.
I mean, like, in terms, it could have easily been the end of the season as also the end of the first book. Like, she stretched it out too. Like, there's so much more books. She could have made, like, she could have made it 15 books.
She definitely could have stretched it out. Didn't need to put this part, the second half-ish in there. And there's a lot of stuff that it's weirdly set up. The one thing that I started not to like about the book is that, like, the last quarter is very dull.
Okay.
So we'll see how they do that with the show. But we are talking about the witch trial because the witch trial is very dramatic.
I don't know if it's going to get better. Like, I don't know how they're going to, like, what the hell else is going to happen that something's going to be, like, an episode's going to be, like, this freaking juicy. Like, I just don't know what. I'm scared because I'm sure there is something, but, like, still, I was like, oh, my God. And, like, props to Stars for the promo because, you were going in, and for people that didn't read the book like myself, I know there are people out there like me, I thought it was gonna be straight up trial the whole entire time. No, it wasn't, and I was completely like, oh. We'll get to that later. But yes, let's start with the trial.
Let's start with the trial. So Claire and Geillis are tossed unceremoniously into like a thief's pit or something, which to some of us is also called an oubliette. It's a big hole in the ground with just one entrance from the top, and it's cold and horrible, and Claire is not very happy with Geillis at this point because she knows that she killed her husband. Geillis killed Arthur, and many other things, and basically she thinks she's a crazy person, which is not very far off.
Yeah. So they're kind of not very much besties at the moment. They're both blaming each other for things. Geillis is blaming Claire because she didn't keep her secrets, and Claire is like, what the hell are you talking about? So it was a lot of blame. And then the first day of the trial comes, and they kind of, after all that shit, they kind of realize they have to, like, band together.
Yeah.
So they are being band together in this trial. They might as well go out together.
Yep. So interesting things happen in the first day of the trial. First of all, they are put on trial, so two of them and a couple of examiners, and they're in a church. So one thing that gets established really early on, Ned shows up. He's the lawyer from Castle Leoch, or solicitor from Castle Leoch, and he shows up and says that under Scottish law, witches are allowed a defense attorney.
Yes. But he also mentions that witchcraft is not part of is not actually something that you could be tried against. And that's under the English law. And even though they are in Scotland, they are under English law. And people are like, they all start freaking out because he mentions, the English.
Yes. So he says when he walks in that I don't remember what it's called, the thing that essentially established the witch trials in the 17th century was abolished in the early 18th century, like 8 years-ish before current time. And the judge or examiner or whatever he is says to him, this is not a criminal trial, this is a religious trial.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that's established early, and I'm glad they did that because all of the evidence is not legal. It's hearsay, and that's a lot of what witch trials were.
Yeah. So the first witness was Geillis's maid, right?
Yes, Geillis's maid, who is a disgruntled employee, more or less.
Yeah, it was like Penny
for the prosecution.
And like most of the stuff she did say was true, but then she elaborated. And like I was just like, what a dick.
Yeah, I liked some of the stuff that was obviously like ridiculous, but if the way that you phrase it can really drive home something weird. Like her housekeeper says that she would sing things outside of Arthur's bedroom, and they were like, "What things?" And evil curses, of course. It's like
evil. I didn't understand it because I'm not a witch.
Exactly. And you get more of that later on with more people pointing out stupid crap.
So at first, it seemed like there was a lot of people that were against Geillis at first, and then we get another witness, which was the mother of the changeling.
Yes, and we knew that was going to come back
to
bite Claire in the ass, really, is the woman who put out the changeling child to hopefully see the fairies trade back her actual baby, was in fact watching the child and saw Claire pick it up and whisper enchantments or something over it and then put it back, and the changeling was dead when I found it.
Mm-hmm.
Dun, dun, dun.
And then Ned talks her, Ned's a real smooth criminal. He talked her into believing that, well, doesn't it comfort you to know that really wasn't your child that died then, and all this stuff. He works it so it just makes it seem like Claire was just helping a child that was dying.
Right, and he says to the woman, why didn't you stop her if you knew she was going to interrupt the ritual? Why didn't you stop her? And couldn't you say that your own fear and unwillingness is actually what led to this whole thing happening, and it wasn't her fault? And she agrees.
Yeah, and I was like, whoa, Ned.
Yeah, Ned is a smooth talker, which is good for a lawyer, I suppose.
Yeah. Especially for Claire at the moment. And then, of course, none other than our favorite Larry shows up. It's not Lohair, I think it's Larry.
It's Leary, yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely spelled Lohair's stupid Gaelic.
Yeah, but it's, what is it now?
Leary? It's Leary.
Larry fucking shows up and just starts talking about how Claire bewitched Jamie to marry her, and that they were supposed to get married and they were in love and blah, 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 and that Claire struck her and all this stuff.
Which none of what she said was false.
No. I don't
Everything she said was true.
Jamie was never promised to Lohair.
No, Jamie was never promised. It was Lohair's belief Leary. It was Leary's belief.
Leary's belief.
That Jamie would marry her.
Yeah, but even, I remember in the first half, both Jamie's bearded bestie and even Leary's family did not want them to get married because Jamie has
no prospects.
Yeah, Jamie had a price on his head at the time, and Leary was still a young, wild, young thing that would never be tamed, even if it was for Jamie. Yeah,
so it was honestly just wishful thinking on her part. But she did go to Claire for a love potion, and Claire did make her a fake love potion. And, you know, Claire did eventually end up marrying Jamie, not that she bewitched him or anything. And Claire did hit her.
Yeah.
So all of it was true, which I thought was interesting, that the one person who entirely told the truth, besides the priest, which we'll get to later, was Leary.
Yeah.
And that hers was the most damning evidence. Besides the priest.
That was the end of day one of the trial.
That was the end of day one. They took a recess and threw them back in the pit. And Ned gave Claire the flask of probably whiskey that, quote, keeps you warm.
Yeah.
So then we have a night of essentially bonding for Geillis and Claire. They sort of realize that they're in a horrible predicament and we might as well not fight with each other.
Yeah. Like they, at this point, I think they both believe they're gonna die.
Yes, they definitely. And Geillis, I don't think ever had any belief that she wouldn't end up burning at the stake, except that she thought Dougal was going to save her.
Yeah, like once she realized Dougal wasn't in town anymore, I think everything was just like, okay, well, whatever.
Well, screw it, I'm gonna die. And that is part of what comes out in this conversation, is that we find out a lot of stuff about Geillis, actually, really quickly. We find out that she is a Jacobite, that she has been siphoning money from her husband to the Jacobite cause, about £1,000 over 2 years. And that she is, in fact, in love with Dougal.
Yes.
It's not just for his power.
Like she calls him like a lion or something. Like,
yeah, she says he is a lion because Cullum fights with the Mackenzies, but he fights for all of Scotland.
Yeah, which was great, and it's great because unlike
I still like Dougal.
Yeah, I still like Dougal. I still like Geillis and everything. But the thing with, and what I thought was interesting about this is that Geillis is pretty much telling her that, yeah, I know I'm probably going to die tomorrow, but that I'm okay with that because I actually had a purpose. I lived for a purpose, which was to help with the rebellion and to, meet Dougal and all this. Whereas Claire kind of was just like she couldn't even answer if she loved Jamie or not.
Yeah, and that was also a big thing with this episode, was Claire figuring out her loyalties. But that whole thing with Geillis, her saying that she felt she had a purpose in life and that that's okay. It's okay if she dies now. And then Claire turning around and saying, I regret that I have but one life to give for my country. I believe that's something that's written later, like in the future.
Probably.
Now I'm going to figure it out, because if you watch Geillis's face, that's where she realizes exactly where Claire is coming from.
Yeah. It was probably something that was said during World War II.
Hold on, I'm finding out. I don't think it was World War II. Nathan Hale. Anyway, yeah, but I thought that was a really well like put together scene. The fact that he says it before he was hanged. He was captured by the British and executed during the American Revolution.
Okay.
And says, I only regret that I have but one life to give for my country. So that's where, like, you see Geillis' face go.
Yeah.
Like, she knows that she's from the future. And I think Geillis always kind of suspected.
I think Geillis knew the moment she saw her. Like, I
don't think that she knew the moment she saw her. I think that she just suspected from her own experiences. But it's that moment where she realizes exactly who Claire is, and then starts wondering, like, what her motivations are.
Yeah.
And so we'll get more to that later. But
Claire just says she wants to go home. Like, when they're in the tunnel being, like, all having, like, kind of like a pity party, but really Geillis isn't. Claire just goes, I just want to go home.
And she says, and I don't even know if that's possible.
Yeah.
And that's also one of the themes of the episode, the idea that all Claire wants is to go home, that she doesn't know if she's in love with Jamie, that all this stuff.
Where is home, Claire? Where is it? She doesn't know.
Exactly. And then they fall asleep, and the next morning it's the second day of the trial, and that's when they finally, you see that they've completely reconciled themselves, and they have, like, a moment right before they're yanked out, which is very nice.
Yeah, they're like a united front of witchcraft.
So
they go to the second day of trial, and that's when
things get heated.
Yeah, that is when
No pun intended, by the way.
the priest shows up.
Yeah, and that whole scene were you as confused by that scene as I was?
It was like he came in and he started like talking about how like from the moment he saw Claire, he knew that she was she was a demon, and like, Eve ran through her veins, like some kind of shit like that. And I was like, okay, like this makes sense. And then he started talking about how she was able to save the boy and he wasn't, and that she was right and he was wrong, and because of this he can no longer be a priest.
Yeah, and that whole speech he's giving, like when at first he walks in and I'm like, oh shit, we knew this was coming because it was in the previously on section, but then he starts talking and he gets to that point where he says, and she was able to do what I could not and save the boy's life. And I was like, is he coming to her defense?
Well, I was like, okay, this is getting weird. And I go, he is an awful human being. Like, he's an awful human being. And I'm like, he's playing. He has to be playing. And then as soon as he said he can no longer be the town's priest, I was like, oh, he's going to make it seem like she used witchcraft to, like, defy him.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that the whole scene, I'm sitting there just going, I don't know what side this is on.
Yeah. My dad was
because you
like,
can see it from either end.
Yeah, my dad was like, oh, maybe he's not a bad guy after all. I'm like, don't hold your breath.
Yeah, and then they say, someone yells, only Satan could turn a man of the cloth away from the church, and then that basically signed her death warrant.
Yeah. So after that, the whole entire place erupts. The priest is sitting next to, I think, Leary, smiling like the Cheshire Cat, because he knows exactly what he did. And Ned
he winks at her.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh god, this is
totally winks at her, and that was gross.
Ned assesses the situation and asks for like a brief recess so he could talk to his clients. Shockingly, they allow it.
Right? They're just like, oh yeah, that's fine. It's quick. Just be brief. And then they walk through the giant throng of people and no one tries to stab them.
And they go into a room, and basically Ned proposes that he's only going to be able to save one of them. And basically what they're going to have to do is that Claire is going to have to say that Geillis bewitched her to become a witch. And she had no idea what she was doing because Geillis did some kind of spell to enlist Claire into helping with her actions.
Yeah.
And then shit gets real.
Then shit really does get real. And it turns into this sort of internal debate within Claire, this fight to like betray her friend and save her own life or let them both die.
Yeah.
And Claire doesn't really want to do it, but at the same time, like, it makes sense for them to do it. And I think Geillis, the second he says it, she knows, well, fuck. I'm dead anyway. What's going to happen? And then so they make Ned leave and they have a conversation, and it's a really heated conversation in which Geillis is sort of freaking out, and she keeps asking Claire what her purpose is.
Yeah, like I think it's completely justified from Geillis' standpoint, is that if I'm gonna freaking die for you, tell me straight up what the hell is going on with you. I know you're not, you weren't traveling to France, and your husband didn't die, and you're not from Oxfordshire, whatever the hell that she says she's from. Like, tell me the truth. And yeah. Claire still won't do it. Even though Claire knows, I think Claire knows, Geillis knows what Claire is, but she still won't admit to it. But the whole thing is, unlike Claire, who still doesn't know her purpose, Geillis knew what her purpose was.
Yeah, and Geillis continuously just asks her, like, don't bullshit me anymore. You have to tell me the truth. Why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you here? And she finally says, I'm here by accident.
Yeah.
And Geillis says, so you didn't want to change anything? You came here by mistake? This wasn't a plan? Mm-hmm. And she says, no. And she's like, then it was all for nothing.
Yeah.
And that's when she resigns herself to her fate and walks out and says, looks like I'm going to a fucking barbecue.
Yeah. Which I thought was like, what? Because when she said it, I was like, why would she know what a barbecue is?
Why would she say the word fucking is a verb? Didn't we establish in the previous episode that Claire is the first person to do that?
thinking of the fucking part because I'm so used to just hearing it in everyday language that didn't. But the barbecue was like what I was like triggered. So I was like, why the hell did she just say barbecue?
Yeah, and that is sort of the audience nod to this is what's about to happen.
Yeah.
But it's only if you're really paying attention and if you think that. When I was reading the book and I got to that point where I found out like who Geillis really was, I was like, why the fuck didn't I see that coming the entire time?
Yeah, I wish like now I kind of like want. Well, we'll talk about it after we actually reveal.
Yeah. Anyway, so they go back into the courtroom and Ned says that Claire is going to make a statement to the court, and then she stands up and says, "No, I'm not."
Yeah.
And so Geillis stands up and is like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Yeah.
And tells her, "You can go back. I think you can go back." And then says 1968 before Claire is unceremoniously yanked down from the pulpit.
Yeah, and then Geillis goes crazy and she gets naked and she shows her.
First though, they start whipping Claire.
Oh, okay, yeah. So they get Claire and they start giving her whip, like Jamie style lashes. And then of course Ginger Spice shows up and all of a sudden, oh, Claire, get your hands off her. And like while, Jamie's about to like sword fight the whole entire congregation, Geillis goes and makes a whole big thing and she rips down her sleeve and she shows her vaccination mark from when she got the vaccination for smallpox.
Yeah.
And she goes, this is the sign of the devil or Satan, and she starts just going crazy and like she pulls off all her clothes and she shows that she's pregnant and she says it's the child of Satan, and the whole entire crowd is now completely focused on Geillis. And Jamie's able to, of course, whisk away Claire.
And Geillis at one point looks at Claire and says, "Run."
Yeah.
And so they leave the building while the whole congregation now pulls Geillis down from the pulpit and carries her out, still screaming. Now covered.
She's like crowd surfing.
Yeah, she's basically crowd surfing on a mob.
Yeah.
To a pyre.
Yeah, crowd surfing, naked, mob, yeah.
And Claire and Jamie manage to escape and never see what becomes of Geillis Duncan.
And we never see what becomes of Geillis. We don't know if she was actually burned or what.
We don't know what has happened at this point.
I know you said there's a difference in the book with.
There's a big difference in the book, which I didn't realize because we'd had a conversation before I had watched the episode. In the book, one of the differences I wish they'd left alone, because for the most part the changes they make a lot of sense. I mean, Ned gets to show up a lot earlier in the trial and it just adds to the drama, as does the idea of Geillis saying 1968 and basically telling Claire, and Claire realizing in the moment the whole deal with the smallpox vaccination scar. That's not necessarily in the book. It's a lot more subtle and in Claire's head that she makes these realizations, but it also diminishes the drama of the moment. So that was all fine. The one thing I wish they'd changed, or not changed, was that it is not Ned's idea for Geillis to take the blame. It's Geillis's idea. When they do all the same things. Claire is about to be burned. She's being whipped. Jamie comes in, yells that awesome line where he's like, I made a vow before God to protect this woman, and if you blah, blah, blah. If you think your authority trumps that thing. He says that, and then Geillis makes that speech, and she stands up and takes all of the blame because she knows that she's going to burn anyway, and that at least she can save this one person who she shares a secret with, essentially. And she, stands up and shouts that she is a witch, that she bewitched Claire, and she, tears off her bodice just as a way of distracting the crowd. And they sort of descend upon her, and Claire and Jamie run. And later on, because this isn't a spoiler at this point, later on we find out that, or at least Jamie tells Claire right after, that they will let her have the baby and then they will kill her.
Yeah. But I don't know if that's going to happen in the show because she does admit that the child is Satan's.
Yes, that's one of the biggest differences they've done in the show, is that Claire stands up, or Geillis stands up and says, I have the child of Satan growing inside me. And she essentially condemns the baby. There's no way they're going to let this kid be born if it's the child of Satan.
I mean, I think she did burn, but
that's my assumption too, based on just what we were shown. I mean, they were taking her to the pyre to light it.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine that something happened where she was saved unless Dougal shows up. Which I feel like we probably would have seen, but we don't know. The showrunner after the episode and the whole behind the scenes of Outlander says we don't know whether this will be the last time we see Geillis Duncan.
Yeah.
So we don't know, and they can change things. Obviously, they've already shown they can change things.
Dougal could show up because Jamie showed up, so they could have come together.
They definitely could have.
We don't know, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I do want. Two things I do want to say before we move on to another moving on from the trial.
Yeah.
Is that during their little recess, Claire does ask Ned, why isn't anyone from the castle coming down to defend us? Like, why can't, and she goes, does Colum know you're here? And he goes, if Colum knew I was here, he would not be too happy with me. And she goes, did Colum have something to do with my arrest? And Ned didn't answer her. And this is something that could totally be possible because Colum is pissed at Jamie for marrying an English woman because now he cannot become laird of Clan Mackenzie. And since he's kind of pissed at Dougal, right now I think Colum rather have Jamie become the laird than Dougal. Yes. So it could have been totally possible that Colum and Leary worked together to get them arrested.
And then my question in that regard is, how much would the clan support Jamie being laird if he was at one time married to a witch? I mean, I guess you could say that he was bewitched.
Exactly. He could always just say, well, she bewitched me to marry her, or Geillis bewitched Dougal to have Dougal marry Jamie. You know, it could have been a whole entire chain of bewitching.
True. It could definitely have been that.
Jamie easily could have got out of it.
I suppose. Yeah, and that's something that's also up in the air in the book, too, is whether or not Colum had anything to do with it, because, again, he doesn't want Ned to help her.
Yes. And then my other thing that I thought was interesting was that we learned that Geillis is from 1968, but she's also in 18th century Scotland a Jacobite. Did she not read a history book? Or does she think that by her coming back, she could have changed the future?
Geillis came back to change the future.
Okay.
That was why she was asking Claire, so you're not here to change anything.
Okay.
She came back on purpose.
So someone told her to do what she did, I guess. She was, like, coached.
Okay. Something to that regard, anyway. It's something I think you discover more in future books.
Okay.
But anyway, now we can move on. Because there's a lot more to come in this episode. It is not just ending with Jamie saving Claire from the trial. Now, Jamie is like, hey, so you've been naked a lot around me, and I kind of have a question, because you also have one of those smallpox vaccination scars and the devil's mark, and I want to know if you're a witch.
Yes. And since, they're all about honesty.
All about the honesty, guys.
Yeah, Claire actually says that this vaccination was from smallpox. Like, she goes into this whole thing using words that clearly Jamie has no idea what they are.
Right.
And then she bites the bullet and tells him that she is from the future.
And then she tells him the whole story, including what is about to happen to the Scots.
Yeah, she tells him all about the clans, how it's like a hopeless cause, everything.
And then Jamie takes a moment and he says,
Okay. I believe you.
Because he just believes her, which I guess makes some sense because she's a bizarre specimen to begin with, so it actually explains all of the things that she's done.
I guess. I mean, like, I guess with the healing and the nursing and, like, that kind of stuff. But I think for people in 18th century Scotland, people from England are bizarre. So maybe he just thought it was a cultural difference.
Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah, like, I don't necessarily think I would jump to, like, she's a time traveler.
But if what she says makes sense, then...
Yeah, and it's not like it's something that they haven't talked about. Like, the guy sang a whole frickin' song about the damn stones. So clearly it's something that happens in Scotland.
And then there's and then of course he continues to be perfect, and takes her to the stones.
Yeah. Which
and says, "You can go home."
I mean, I like Jamie. I really do. But like, this is just like another part of me is just like, oh, like I just want to be like, stop. Just do something wrong for once. And he can't.
Yeah, I agree. At the same time, though, this is one of those moments where this is exactly how I would have written it. Like, yeah, Jamie is going to say, "You don't want to be here. Go this way."
Yeah.
But they did change, again, this is another thing that they changed and they expanded for reasons I don't understand, is that it takes Jamie a while to sort of realize what he has to do. Because he talks for a while with her, like when they're traveling, he talks to her about Lallybrook and their new home and all this stuff, and then he realizes that she's not having it, and then he takes her to the stones. In the book, he finds out where she's from. He says that whole thing about, so that day when you ran off, you were just going to the stones. He realizes where she really wants to be and immediately takes her to the stones.
Yeah. Whereas in the show, he does realize that when she ran off, that's where she was going. But I don't know. I think he was trying to search for maybe a clue that she was actually happy here. So I think so when he realized she wasn't like extremely thrilled, then I think he was like, okay. And
yeah, it just made Claire's decision it gave Claire's decision a little more weight, I thought, than anything. But so he takes her to the stones, and something that's interesting is that she would have gone. She would have touched that stone and gone. When he brought her there initially, he says, so how does this work? And she's like, I don't really know. I just heard a buzzing. And then she starts walking toward the stone and she's inches away from touching it. And he grabs her arm and pulls her back.
Yeah.
So she would have touched it if he hadn't stopped her, which I think is interesting. I'm not saying that she would have chosen Claire over Jamie. I'm saying that she would have gone through and probably regretted the decision. Yes. In the same way that if she'd had a second to think about it when she initially touched the stones, if like she knew what was going to happen and she had a second to decide whether or not she wanted to touch them, she wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, but I think it's, I think maybe, yes, I guess she would have touched the stone. I think it's a good thing that Jamie stopped her because it did finally, she did realize how much she meant to Jamie, I think. At that moment, like even though he brought her there, he knew what was going to happen. He wasn't ready yet to say goodbye. Like he didn't think it was going to like be like, okay, bye. That fast. And then he makes like, okay, well, take your time. I'm going to stay at camp until nightfall. Yet again, the camp is like so far away. Like, why is the camp so far away?
Yeah, why doesn't he just hang out over by like a tree?
Yeah, I mean, like, why did you have to go, like, miles away? Like,
I want to make sure you're safe. You're, like, 3 miles from where she is.
It's just, like, the same thing when she was, like, with Willie. She ran really fast away from Willie because they were a distance when she tried to so she's sitting there, and then, like, all of a sudden, she gets up and she goes back to Jamie. And you're kind of...
Yeah, she's weighing the 2 rings on her hands.
Of course.
Yeah, and there was a neat shot with her gold ring where it had her reflection in it.
Mm-hmm.
That was cool. So that was interesting. I liked it. I liked the way that they shot. I don't really have any complaints about the second half of the episode.
Yeah. I just know that I watch Outlander with my father, and when people were like, "Isn't that awkward?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
You do it enough times, I think it would stop getting awkward.
I think I've watched. Don't watch Broad City with your parents. If you watch Broad City, that's awkward. But Outlander's not bad. The whole entire Jamie brought him to the stones. He was like, if she doesn't choose Jamie, I'm gonna be pissed off. He was like so serious. He goes, I like Frank, don't get me wrong. But Jamie's did so much for her. And she's probably spent more time with Jamie. Like her and Frank didn't see each other for 5 freaking years. She's going to choose Frank over Jamie. I'm like, Dad, chill. Like, I don't think she's going to choose Frank over Jamie. Like, we have a whole, like, 5 more episodes.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I also wonder whether if faced with both men in front of her, who she would choose. Because Jamie has sort of like, I'm not, discounting their relationship, and obviously she has feelings and everything. I am on Team Frank because I like Frank. He's a big nerd, but Jamie has the immediacy of it being a new relationship and there being all of this drama involved, and that whole thing at the end of the movie Speed, when she says like relationships started and stressful situations never last. So like I wonder how much of that was an impulse to go with the person who you have the strongest feelings for at the moment, and not necessarily the person who your relationship lasted 5 years of not seeing each other.
Yeah.
So that's just my question of like, the actual logic of choosing this one person over this other person.
I mean, do I find Frank more interesting? Yeah. Jamie is better to look at. I don't think there's any denying that.
I suppose that's your own opinion.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Frank isn't bad. Frank isn't bad looking. I'm not saying like, oh God, no. But I'm just saying like in a marble statue sense, Jamie.
Okay, yeah. In a marble statue sense, Jamie is better looking.
Yeah. I think Frank and Jamie are different, but I think they're also very similar. I think there's more of a physical attraction to Jamie for Claire, but I think their relationship went maybe a little bit deeper because they've been put into so many of these dramatic situations where they have to, fight for each other. Whereas, Frank and Claire are more, they make sense on paper.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think her relationship with Frank is simpler.
Yeah, I think for Claire and Frank, Claire was in charge. Frank did whatever Claire said, and life was easy. And Jamie, I think, challenges Claire to a point where she hasn't ever been challenged before. So
I don't necessarily know whether those challenges are good or bad, though. Yeah. I don't know. I would pick Frank, but that's me.
I would pick Bearded Bestie.
You would pick Bearded Bestie. Which actually, his role in saving Claire is not mentioned, but he is the reason that Jamie comes back in the book.
Oh, damn it. Why is that?
He figures out what's going on and rides for like 2 days straight to find Jamie. That
man needs more airtime.
He really does. You're going to find out some fun stuff about him in the future, though, I think. Anyway, so that's the end of the episode. Claire chooses Jamie. Yay, let's go home to Lollybrook. So that is the next episode. We have to wrap things up because we're going a little long.
Yeah. That was a big episode.
What?
It was a big episode.
It was a big episode. So next week we get to visit Lollybrook, which I know is the episode that you've been waiting for.
Yes, because Jenny's in it.
Because Jenny is in it.
And Jenny, even in the preview, seems like a complete badass.
She's awesome. I love her.
He's like, oh, so you're staying? Because, she's probably, been playing, Lady, and her husband have been playing Laird, and now all of a sudden Jamie's back. The man that let Jack Randall rape her. We'll see.
Yeah, those conversations are going to go interestingly. So, yeah, we go back to Lollybrook, and I'm excited, and it'll be fun, and then that starts up the whole rest of the season. Mm-hmm. And what will eventually come from it.
Can Claire not go back to Castle Leoch or that village anymore? Is she a
more or less.
Okay.
Not really a fugitive, I don't think, but it's not going to be good for her if she goes back. Okay. She has essentially been convicted of witchcraft.
Figured.
But at the same time, Geillis is the one who confessed and said, more or less clear Claire's name. Basically, it's not a good place for her to go.
Yeah, it's they shouldn't get a vacation in there.
Yeah, I don't think it would go well for her. I'm certain that Jamie has no intentions of going back because they put his wife on trial. Mm-hmm. And Colin was, part of that, obviously. So
are we done with Lahair or Lohiri or whatever the fuck?
Leary? Yeah.
Thank God.
We're done with Leary.
So that means Jack Randall has to come back into play because one villain.
We need a new villain or an old villain.
We haven't really seen him, so I would actually not be opposed to some Jack Randall shenanigans.
Understandable. So, I mean, do we want to make much in the way of predictions? Because next week is going to be, I think, a reset episode.
Yeah, like you can't. Well, you can't predict.
I can't make predictions because I know what's going to happen. But
yeah. I think, I don't really think you can make like long-term predictions until what happens after next week, because I think we're going to we're like resetting the story in a new location. So a lot of our storylines and predictions ended last week. So
yeah,
I have nothing to predict except for Jenny's going to be the shit.
She is totally going to be the shit. I'm not even going to, wait on that one. She's going to be the shit. Jenny's awesome. I love her, and I want more of her. And I haven't even actually really seen her on camera. We're gonna find out more about, things of the past.
So like maybe we'll find some like Jamie Fraser flaws.
Perhaps.
Maybe.
Perhaps. And yeah, so we have 5 episodes left, right? 4 episodes, 5 episodes. We have 5 episodes left. There's a ton more book left. There's like, 2/3, or not 2/3, like a third of the book at least. Left to go, and there's plenty of stuff that happens. I'm interested to see how they deal with the last chunk, because like I said, I was a little bored, but we'll see. I think that's it for us. I think we're done. Outlander will air tomorrow on Stars at 9 p.m. That is Saturday tomorrow, 9 p.m. on Stars. This show airs usually Wednesdays at 6 p.m. right here on the All Geek to Me TV YouTube channel. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you'd like to talk about with Outlander's Witch Trial episode, please feel free to leave them in the comments. You can also send them to us on Twitter at AllGeek2MeNet, at Trisha Ennis is me, at Kate Calabro is her, and hashtag 2Chicks1Show for any of your 2Chicks1Show comments. We love to read them. We hope to hear from you, and we will see you next week.
Bye!